Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something we've all experienced at some point. That frustrating situation where someone is clearly attached to you, but for some reason, they won't fully step forward. You know the feeling. One moment, he's warm, attentive, almost irresistible in the way he makes you feel special, and the next, he's distant, distracted, and leaving you confused. Now, before you think that means he's not interested, I want you to understand this truth. Mixed signals don't always mean lack of attraction. Sometimes they mean fear of vulnerability. So, here are 4 signs he's emotionally attached but scared. This isn't about playing games. It's about his heart saying, I want this. While his fear says, what if I get hurt? That push and pull is often a battle within him, not a reflection of your worth. He notices when you're tired, he walks you safely to your car, he worries when you're upset. Even if he's not your boyfriend, that protective instinct reveals he's emotionally invested, even if he won't put a label on it yet. Maybe he shares something about his past, his struggles, or his dreams. For a moment, he's open. Then suddenly, he changes the topic, almost embarrassed. That's not a lack of connection, that's the fear of being seen too deeply. He might not call you his, but he can't hide that flicker of jealousy, his silence, his change in tone, even the way he suddenly tries harder to impress you. That's emotional attachment fighting with fear of admitting it. When someone is emotionally attached but scared, the first thing you'll notice is that his behavior seems inconsistent. One moment he's leaning in, showing you warmth, affection, and energy that makes you feel chosen, and the next moment he's distant, harder to read, maybe even a little cold. This inconsistency often makes people think, he's playing games, or he's not really interested. But the truth is, mixed signals don't always come from a lack of attraction. Sometimes they come from fear. Think about what happens when a person starts to genuinely care. Caring means vulnerability. If he likes you, if he feels something deeper than surface level attraction, suddenly there's something at stake. If you walk away, it's going to hurt. If he opens up, you'll see the parts of him he normally keeps hidden. That realization creates tension inside him, a push and pull between wanting to get closer and wanting to protect himself. And that tension shows up as hot and cold behavior. Picture this. He's laughing with you, making plans, maybe even texting you throughout the day. In that moment, his guard is down and he's allowing himself to enjoy the connection. But later, he might go quiet, cancel plans, or create distance. Not because he's lost interest, but because he's suddenly overwhelmed by what that closeness could mean. He might worry about losing control of his emotions, about getting too attached and being hurt in the future. For someone who isn't ready to admit how much he cares, pulling back feels like a form of self-protection. It's important to understand that this kind of inconsistency doesn't usually come from a calculated strategy. He's not sitting there plotting how to confuse you. It's a reflex, almost like a defense mechanism. The closer he feels, the scarier it becomes. Fear can disguise itself as detachment, as hesitation, or as sudden mood changes. It's not that he doesn't feel strongly. It's that he feels too strongly and doesn't know how to handle it. This can be incredibly confusing if you're on the receiving end. You might wonder if you did something wrong, if you were too much, or if he's just not into you. But the reality is that the problem isn't about you doing too much or too little. It's about his internal struggle. He's torn between desire and fear, between connection and self-preservation. That's why one day he's holding your hand like he never wants to let go, and the next he seems withdrawn or distracted. Now, does that mean you should always excuse mixed signals? Not at all. Your worth isn't measured by how patient you are with someone else's fears, but it does mean you can start to see this behavior for what it is. Not a lack of interest, but a sign that he feels something deeper than he's ready to admit. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice that his pullbacks often come after moments of closeness. The timing isn't random. He's not drifting away when things are boring. He's pulling away right after things feel exciting, real, or intimate. That pattern is a telltale sign of emotional attachment colliding with fear. For you, recognizing this helps you detach your self-worth from his inconsistency. Instead of spiraling into doubt when he pulls back, you can see it as his own emotional hurdle. The key is to stay grounded in your standards. His fear is real, but it's his to manage. You don't need to prove you're safe or bend yourself to calm his insecurities. Mixed signals aren't your burden to solve. They're his reflection of how he handles attachment. So when you see that dance of affection and withdrawal, understand it's often not a game. It's his battle with vulnerability. It's his fear of being hurt in the exact same place he's beginning to feel something powerful. And that fear is what makes his signals so confusing. When a man is emotionally attached but scared, one of the clearest signs you'll notice is his protective behavior. It's not always loud or obvious. In fact, it often shows up in small, subtle actions that reveal his care for you long before he's ready to put his feelings into words. This protective instinct is a natural expression of emotional investment, and it surfaces because he feels a responsibility, even if unspoken, toward your well-being. The key here is that he may not call you his, he may not even verbalize commitment, but his actions betray that you matter more than he wants to admit. Think about the way he looks out for you in everyday situations. He might insist on walking you to your car late at night, not because he's trying to make a grand gesture, but because the thought of you being unsafe makes him uneasy. He might offer to carry something heavy, check if you've eaten when you're working long hours, or remind you to rest when you're stressed. These aren't romantic declarations, but they are protective moves that show his attachment. When a man doesn't care, he's indifferent. When he does care but is scared, he expresses it through action rather than words. What makes this dynamic tricky is that he may try to hide the depth of his concern. He doesn't want to come across as controlling, clingy, or more invested than he's ready to admit. So the protection can feel subtle, almost casual. He phrases it like a suggestion, text me when you get home, or let me check that for you. But beneath those casual tones is something real, a pull to make sure you're safe, comfortable, and looked after. That pull doesn't exist when someone is only casually interested. It exists when he's emotionally involved. Fear, however, complicates the picture, because as much as he feels protective, he also doesn't want to fully reveal how much he cares. That fear of vulnerability makes him downplay his actions. He'll do something thoughtful, then brush it off like it's nothing. He'll show up when you need help, then act like it was no big deal. He's trying to protect his own heart by making his protection of you look ordinary. But you'll notice the pattern. He consistently looks out for you in ways he doesn't for others. This protective instinct also shows up emotionally, not just physically. He pays attention when you're upset. He notices shifts in your tone, the small signs that you're not okay. He may not always know how to talk about feelings, especially if he's scared of how attached he's becoming. But he notices, and noticing is a form of protection in itself. It shows he's tuned in, even when he's pretending not to be. Another sign is how he reacts when others hurt you or speak negatively about you. Even if he doesn't say much, you'll feel the tension in him. He may defend you, change the subject, or later reassure you in some quiet way. That's the protective instinct again. It's not just about physical safety, it's about emotional safety too. When a man is detached, criticism about you doesn't matter to him. But when he's attached, it unsettles him, even if he doesn't fully understand why. It's easy to underestimate this kind of behavior because it doesn't come with big speeches. But often, the quiet gestures of protection say more about his attachment than words ever could. People can say, "I care about you," without meaning it, but it's much harder to consistently show up, notice details, and take actions that keep you safe and supported without genuine feeling behind it. The reason protection is such a powerful sign is that it ties into something primal. When he feels protective of you, It means he's invested in your well-being beyond his own needs. That level of care doesn't appear unless there's emotional attachment. The fear is what holds him back from admitting it openly, from saying, "I care about you more than I should." So instead, his care leaks out in protective ways that feel safe to him, because he can tell himself it's just kindness or politeness. But deep down, it's more than that. So when you notice him watching out for you, making sure you're okay, stepping in at the right moments, or even worrying about small things that others wouldn't notice, understand that these are not random acts of courtesy. They are signs of attachment. They reveal a man whose heart is invested, even if his words haven't caught up with his actions yet. And while fear may keep him from declaring it, his instinct to protect you gives him away every single time. When a man is emotionally attached but scared, one of the clearest windows into that tension is the way he sometimes lets his guard down in conversation, and then just as quickly pulls it back up. It's like watching someone open a door to their inner world for a moment, let you peek inside, and then slam it shut before you can step through. That behavior is not random. It's a reflection of how much he feels for you and how much that feeling unsettles him. At the heart of it, deep conversations are risky. When he shares something about his past, his struggles, or even his hopes for the future, he's revealing pieces of himself that aren't polished, rehearsed, or surface level. That's intimacy. And intimacy requires trust. If he's scared of how much he's starting to care, those moments of openness feel both irresistible and dangerous. He wants to connect with you, but at the same time, the thought of being truly seen makes him vulnerable in ways he doesn't know how to handle. Imagine you're having an ordinary conversation, and suddenly, he brings up something that feels heavier or more personal. Maybe a story about his childhood, maybe a moment when he failed, maybe a dream he hasn't told anyone else. For a brief second, he forgets to filter himself. He's not trying to impress you, he's just being real. That's the sign of emotional attachment, because with people he doesn't care about, he stays on the surface. He doesn't risk exposing himself. With you, he does, even if it's fleeting. But then comes the fear. As soon as he realizes he's gone too deep, he'll try to patch over it. He might joke, change the subject, or even become distant. It's like he's thinking, wait, I've shown too much. If she knows this about me, she has power over me. That quick retreat can be confusing, because one moment he's incredibly open, and the next, he seems closed off. But that shift is not about lack of interest. It's about his inner alarm system going off. He feels the weight of his own vulnerability, and his instinct is to protect himself. This pattern is common when someone hasn't fully come to terms with their emotions. He doesn't consciously plan to give you pieces of his heart, it just slips out because his attachment is real. But the moment he realizes what he's done, fear kicks in. Fear of being judged, fear of being rejected, fear of being dependent on someone who could walk away. That cocktail of emotions creates the hot and cold rhythm you experience in conversation. From your perspective, these moments can feel frustrating, but also revealing. They frustrate because you want consistency. You want him to stay open, not retreat into silence. But they reveal because they show you that he does, in fact, feel safe enough with you to let some of his guard down. If he didn't care, he wouldn't risk even that small glimpse of vulnerability. He would keep things light, shallow, and impersonal. The fact that he slips into honesty, even briefly, shows that you've reached a level with him that others haven't. It's also worth noticing the content of what he shares. Often, the things he blurts out in those unguarded moments aren't random. They tend to be meaningful, sometimes even things that weigh heavily on him. He may share about a loss, a family issue, or a personal failure that shaped him. He may talk about fears he has for the future, or the kind of life he secretly wants. Those subjects matter because they're the places where his identity feels most raw. If he trusts you enough to let those things out, even for a second, that's a huge indicator of emotional depth. The retreat afterward can make you question whether he meant it, but don't mistake his withdrawal for dishonesty. The truth is, he meant every word in the moment. His pullback is not erasure. It's fear of what comes next. Now that you know a deeper part of him, he has to sit with the reality that you could accept it or reject it. That's a risk he's not entirely ready for, so he retreats to protect himself. These moments of openness, followed by quick shutdowns, are like the footprints of emotional attachment. They leave a trail that tells you he feels more than he says. And while he may not be ready to keep the door open, the fact that he opens it at all is proof that you matter to him. His fear may keep him from sustained vulnerability, but his attachment keeps pulling him back into those fleeting, unguarded moments where the truth of his feelings slips through. When a man is emotionally attached but scared, one of the most telling behaviors is how he reacts when you bring up other men or when someone else shows you attention. He may not openly claim you, he may not even call you his, but the flicker of discomfort that runs through him tells a bigger story. That discomfort is jealousy, even if he tries to mask it. And it's important to note that jealousy, in this context, isn't about control or possessiveness. It's about fear of losing something he already values, but hasn't found the courage to admit out loud. You might notice this in small, subtle shifts. Maybe you mention a male coworker, and he suddenly goes quiet, or makes a quick, sarcastic comment. Maybe someone compliments you in front of him, and he laughs it off, but his body language stiffens. Or maybe he just changes the subject abruptly, as if the idea of you being desired by someone else is too uncomfortable to sit with. These reactions are not random. They're windows into the fact that he already sees you as someone who matters deeply, even though he hasn't stepped forward to define the relationship. What makes this sign so interesting is the contradiction it carries. On one hand, he doesn't want to lock himself into vulnerability by admitting how much he cares. On the other hand, the idea of you being taken away unsettles him. So he ends up stuck in a quiet struggle. He doesn't want to confess his attachment, but he can't help reacting when something threatens it. That's why you often see inconsistency in these moments. Sometimes he'll brush it off and act indifferent. Other times he'll let a sharper comment slip, or he might even try to compete for your attention without acknowledging why. For someone scared of attachment, jealousy is particularly difficult to manage. When he feels it, it forces him to confront emotions he's been avoiding. He doesn't want to admit to himself that he cares this much because caring means risk. Yet the sting of jealousy is undeniable proof that he's emotionally invested. That's why it can feel like his mask slips when these situations happen. He can control his words most of the time, but his reactions, a pause, a shift in tone, a subtle tension, give him away. It's also worth noticing how he handles those moments afterward. Often, a man who's attached but scared will try to cover his reaction with humor, sarcasm, or by withdrawing. He doesn't want to reveal his vulnerability, so he'll act like he's joking or pretend it doesn't matter. But beneath that cover is the truth: he does care, and he's afraid of losing you. The contradiction is that his fear of being hurt keeps him from stepping forward, yet his fear of losing you makes him struggle with jealousy. That tension creates behavior that seems confusing on the surface, but makes perfect sense when you recognize it as emotional attachment colliding with fear. Another layer to this is that jealousy doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's incredibly subtle. He might become quieter when another man is around, or he might suddenly pay more attention to you when he feels competition. Maybe he'll lean in closer, maybe he'll go out of his way to make you laugh, maybe he'll find excuses to remind you of his presence. These little shifts aren't about showing off. They're about reassuring himself that your attention is still on him. Without openly claiming you, he tries to reaffirm his connection in small ways. What's important to understand is that jealousy is a mirror. It shows him emotions he hasn't admitted and forces him to acknowledge, at least internally, that you matter. If he felt nothing for you, he wouldn't react at all. Indifference is the true opposite of love or attachment. So when you see jealousy, even in small doses, it's not just insecurity, it's evidence of emotional depth he hasn't voiced. From your perspective, these moments can feel both validating and frustrating. Validating because his reaction confirms that you matter to him. Frustrating because he still won't openly express it. That's the paradox of a man who's attached but scared. His emotions leak out through reactions he can't fully control, but he stops himself from turning them into declarations. So when you notice the flicker of jealousy without ownership, what you're really seeing is the tug of war inside him. He wants to protect himself from vulnerability, but he can't suppress the truth that he cares. That truth escapes in the way his mood shifts, the way he pays attention, and the way he notices when someone else gets close to you. His fear may keep him silent, but his reactions tell the story his words won't. When a man is emotionally attached but scared, one of the clearest indicators is that his actions often speak louder than his words. He may hesitate to openly declare his feelings or commit to strong verbal affirmations, but his behavior tells a different story. This is where acts of care become the true language of his attachment. Even if he avoids direct conversations about emotions, he reveals himself in the way he consistently shows up for you, helps you, and looks after your needs in ways that go beyond surface-level courtesy. What makes this so powerful is the contrast. A man who isn't attached may say all the right things but fail to back them up with consistency. He can promise, flatter, and charm, but when it comes to effort, he doesn't invest. A man who is emotionally attached but afraid, on the other hand, often does the opposite. He may hold back from romantic declarations, but he demonstrates his feelings through thoughtful gestures, practical support, and the small ways he makes your life easier or brighter. His care comes through not in dramatic speeches, but in consistent, tangible actions. Think about the way he notices your routines and responds to them. If he knows you had a long day, he might bring you coffee or check in to make sure you got home safely. If something breaks in your house, he offers to fix it. If you're stressed, he finds subtle ways to ease your burden, whether by making you laugh, distracting you with something light-hearted, or taking small tasks off your plate. He may not say, "I'm attached to you," but the time and energy he invests make it clear that you're important to him. These acts of care are often understated, but they add up to something undeniable. For example, he might remember details you casually mentioned, the name of a childhood pet, the kind of tea you like, or a deadline you were worried about, and bring them up later. That memory isn't random. It's evidence that he listens closely, pays attention, and values the things that matter to you. Someone who's emotionally detached rarely bothers with those details. But someone who's attached, even if scared, can't help but internalize them. What complicates this dynamic is that he may downplay or deflect the significance of what he does. If you thank him, he might brush it off with, "It's nothing," or "Don't mention it." That's his fear speaking. Admitting that his actions mean something would require admitting how much you mean to him. So he minimizes, even though his actions clearly go beyond what's ordinary. He wants to care for you without being forced to confront how deeply that care runs. There's also an element of protection in these acts of service. He may not always be comfortable sharing his emotions, but he knows how to do things that keep you safe, supported, or comfortable. If you're walking on a busy street, he subtly positions himself on the outside. If you're cold, he offers his jacket. If you're sick, he shows up with medicine. These things may feel small in isolation, but they speak volumes about his emotional investment. They demonstrate a kind of loyalty and attentiveness that goes far beyond casual interest. The distinction here is that his attachment shows in ways he may not even consciously realize. He could convince himself that he's just being helpful or polite, but the consistency of his actions proves otherwise. He wouldn't make this effort repeatedly for someone he didn't care about. And it's that consistency, the pattern of caring behavior over time, that reveals his emotional bond. From your perspective, These actions may sometimes feel confusing because they don't always line up with his words. He might say, "I don't know what I want," but still show up when you need him most. He might hesitate to define the relationship, but he invests his time and energy in ways that clearly show you're a priority. That contradiction can be frustrating, but it also tells you that his fear is the barrier, not a lack of feeling. When words and actions don't align, it's the actions that carry more weight. Words can be delayed, hidden, or even denied because they expose vulnerability. Actions, on the other hand, slip out naturally. They're harder to fake and harder to suppress. And in the case of a man who's emotionally attached but scared, his actions are the trail that leads you to the truth. So when you find yourself questioning his feelings, pay attention to the ways he invests in your life. Look at the patterns of care, the small sacrifices, the moments he steps in without being asked. That's where his heart reveals itself. Even if his fear holds him back from fully articulating his emotions, his actions quietly tell you everything you need to know. When a man is emotionally attached but scared, one of the deepest fears driving his hesitation is the fear of losing control. At its core, emotional attachment requires surrender. It means allowing another person into your world in a way that could change how you think, how you feel, and even how you make decisions. For someone who values independence or who has been hurt before, that surrender feels threatening. It's not that he doesn't want connection. It's that connection feels like stepping into a space where he no longer has complete command over his own emotions. Losing control in this sense doesn't mean becoming reckless. It means that his heart starts to override the careful walls he has built. Before meeting you, he may have been comfortable in his own rhythm, living life on his terms, answering to no one. But when he feels attached, that changes. Suddenly, your mood affects his mood. Your presence impacts his day. The possibility of losing you has weight. That level of influence can feel overwhelming, especially for someone who prides himself on being self-sufficient. He realizes that the more he cares, the less control he has over his emotional stability. This fear often shows up in subtle behaviors. He may hesitate to make plans that feel too committed, not because he doesn't want them, but because committing means acknowledging how much power you hold in his life. He might resist labels or avoid long conversations about the future, not because the future with you is unappealing, but because it forces him to admit he's already invested. His reluctance isn't rejection, it's self-protection. He's trying to keep control over feelings that already feel bigger than him. The paradox is that he often already has lost some of that control without realizing it. He thinks avoiding vulnerability keeps him safe, but his actions, his care, his jealousy, his protectiveness show that you've already impacted him deeply. He tries to fight it by pulling back, by acting indifferent, or by distracting himself, but those efforts are rarely sustainable. Emotional attachment has a way of surfacing whether he wants it to or not. Another layer of this fear comes from past experiences. If he's been hurt before, he may associate deep feelings with pain. To him, falling in love might not just feel exciting. It might feel like walking back into a trap he once barely escaped. Losing control of his emotions once led to heartbreak, so now he equates vulnerability with danger. When he senses that same loss of control happening again, even with someone he truly cares about, his instinct is to resist. That resistance often looks like mixed signals, hesitation, or unexplained distance. Control is also tied to identity. For many men, being in control is connected to their sense of strength and stability. Admitting that someone else has the power to affect them so deeply can feel like weakness. He doesn't want to feel dependent, because dependence means risk. So even though he may want closeness, he subconsciously sabotages it to regain a sense of balance. He'll keep part of himself guarded, holding back just enough so that he doesn't feel completely vulnerable. From your perspective, this can be confusing and even painful. You see the signs of care, the moments of closeness, the evidence of attachment, and yet you also see him retreat. It feels contradictory, But that contradiction makes sense when you understand it as fear of losing control. He's not rejecting you, he's wrestling with himself. One side of him longs for the comfort of connection, while the other side panics at the idea of not being fully in charge of his emotions. The important thing to remember is that this fear isn't about you being unworthy or him not feeling enough. If anything, it's the opposite. The more he feels, the scarier it becomes, because with deeper feelings comes deeper risk. He knows that letting go of control means giving you the ability to affect him in ways no one else can. That's why his hesitation is not proof of indifference, but proof of how much you already matter to him. In the end, fear of losing control is really fear of surrendering to love itself. Love requires risk,